It never ends, right? The skull has so many features. This is the last view of the skull that we consider. When you study the skull, a good way to study is to go through the views and name the bones. Not really think about knowing the bone, but understanding each view. This picture here is a superior view with the parietal bones cut away at the top. Look at the picture on the left to get a sense of what you're seeing. So this is like removing the brain and looking top down. So my mom had many brain surgeries in the 1980s. And back then, they basically did this. She had a scar beginning at her temples and circling her head. I mean, can you imagine healing from a surgery that basically lifts your brain up and out? All right, where do we start on a picture like this? Let's just work from anterior to posterior. We know the frontal bone is the forehead bone, and the ethmoid bone is new to us. It seems to articulate with the frontal bone, like it's nestled in the frontal bone. It is. The ethmoid bone can be associated with the really complicated structures of the nasal cavity. Your nasal cavity is a lot bigger than the canals that lead to it. It's complicated cavern of bone and fleshy folds, and the ethmoid bone creates some of that cavern. So this little tiny triangle of bone here really doesn't do the ethmoid bone justice. You can see it from a lateral view. I don't teach from a lateral view of the inside of the skull because it's not a model that schools commonly have. Okay, there's the sphenoid bone again, and in this view it looks much larger. There's the temporal bone, which you can see articulating with the sphenoid. We can see the left and right parietal bones that we know are really like the top sides of the skull. And the occipital bone is the back and underneath. I should say posterior and inferior curve of the skull. Take a moment to pause this slideshow and really look at this view. This picture is so foreign to students. Have you ever looked at a skull in this way? Most have not. Some have. It's important to linger on figures like this. You know the skull from the outside. Know it from the inside too. Please. Let's enhance on the anterior of the inside of the skull. Remember that you are looking top down. This little triangle here was that new bone called the ethmoid bone, and I said to associate this with the nasal cavity. So these little holes here, they lead from your nasal cavity to the part of your brain that senses smell. You inhale through your nose, and then the particles in the air are analyzed by your brain as they diffuse through these little holes in the ethmoid bone. The holes are called the cribriform plates. You have two cribriform plates, one on each side, and the little ridge between them is called the crista galli. I don't have anything interesting to say about that structure. Let's move on to the structures here that are on the sphenoid bone. Can you see the sutures that lie between the sphenoid and the temporal bones here? They're very faint, but take a look in those deep wells. The sphenoid bone has these vague structures called wings, which are just curvatures of the bone. Here is the greater wing of the sphenoid bone. Yes, there's a lesser wing. It's not worth noting in this picture. This structure in the middle is called the sella turcica, which means Turk's saddle. Interesting. So you may not be able to get this shape from the picture, but this structure is a U shape, and it cradles the pituitary gland that kind of hangs off the bottom of the brain.